Hello everybody, Daniel McCabe here from GI Energy, and today I want to talk to you about the hidden costs of a poor quality solar install. I've been doing this since 2009 with GI Energy since 2011, so I've been doing this for quite a while in a relatively young industry, and it's fair to say over the years I've seen quite a lot of stuff, learned quite a lot from my own mistakes and sometimes, and also from other people's mistakes that I've seen in terms of poor quality installs. So I think I have some value to add here if you're looking into solar energy or if you already had solar installed. What I'd like to start with is just a few statistics. If you look at the solar industry at present, I was recently told that the average lifespan of a solar installer or a solar retailer here in Australia is only 2.2 years. That's not a lot of time, considering most people are handing out 10-year workmanship or labour warranties on their installs. Another statistic that's quite alarming is if you looked at the Clean Energy Council list of accredited solar panels that were able to be sold and installed in Australia in 2011 and then compared that to 2020, you'd find that 83% of those solar panel manufacturers either went out of business or went out of the country, meaning if you purchased from one of those 83%, you basically wouldn't have a warranty to look after those panels. So if they had to come down from your roof, then unfortunately you would be left with the bill. What we're seeing now is a surge of new batteries entering into the market. So in a similar way, in 2013, there was a huge uptick in solar panels being sold and approved here. We're now starting to see that with batteries. Whenever we go to a trade show or an expo, there's always new batteries there. You go to the same trade show or expo the next year, and quite often a lot of those manufacturers are no longer there anymore. Problem with that is some of them are entering into the market on a very cheap price point, and that might be appealing to a consumer who might not be as educated as someone in the industry. You purchase a battery, you think you've got a great deal, they leave the market. Unfortunately, that then means that obviously you have no warranty again. Batteries are not cheap to buy, they're certainly not cheap to replace or repair, so something to consider there is picking the right brand before you make that decision and have it installed. So those are some of the issues that we're seeing. We expect that to happen with batteries, as I say, with panels. That aside, I reckon we probably take 5 to 10 phone calls a week in the office with people that have had solar systems installed by somebody else. They're no longer working and they can't get a hold of that company for one reason or another, and they're just hitting Google and trying to find another person to come and help them get it fixed. The issue with that is that it's not always straightforward, and unfortunately, if you've installed a system and it's not installed correctly, your warranties may or may not be valid. So there's quite a few examples, unfortunately, where we've had to go to somebody's house, inspect their system, find out what was wrong, and then tell the customer that because it wasn't installed correctly or installed to the correct standards within the warranty spec, that unfortunately it's not covered, and they're now going to have to pay for a new inverter, pay for new panels, and then also pay a fairly significant labour cost sometimes to do the work to get it up and running. So the issues that we're seeing with poor quality installs, we'll start with the inverter. That's probably the most common one. Oftentimes a cheap inverter brand has been installed. What we've seen is some of the larger retailers and installers in the country are often importing them themselves, which means that they're then the warranty holder. So they're saving costs, which is fantastic because they're importing directly, but under Australian consumer law, it means that they're then the warranty holder. So if they're no longer in business, your warranty is gone. So we see that a lot where inverters have failed because they're a cheaper product and they need to be replaced with something new because there's no warranty. Sometimes it's a good quality inverter as well, and obviously anything electrical has a failure rate. You can have the best inverter in the world and just be unlucky, and sometimes then we are called to site again, the company that installed it isn't around, so there's labour costs there. Even if it is under warranty, someone's going to have to pay the cost to come and identify the problem, then come out and change the inverter. And while some manufacturers offer some compensation for that in their warranty, it's never enough to cover the whole cost, so the customer is left out of pocket again. So inverters is probably the main one, and it could be a poor quality inverter. It could also just be, it's a good quality inverter and you've been unlucky, but you're still left holding the bag if the company's not around to help. Secondly, the next common one at the moment is with the solar panels on the roof. Again, same thing, a lot of people were importing their own panels and have now left the market. That means there's no warranty. One of the most common failures there with solar panels has been water ingress. So if you imagine a panel might have been on a roof for 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes even only 6 months, and then sometimes a lot longer than that. It may have a 25-year warranty on paper, but if the warranty is not valid anymore, it doesn't help if you're starting to get water into the cells. So that's quite a common one. The seal on the panels isn't good enough, or it hasn't been dried effectively in the factory. So then over time that seal decays and you get water into the cells. It's a really difficult one to identify where that problem is, because it can be an inconsistent fault, so you have to actually get up on the roof and try and find out what's going on. It can be really labor intensive to identify that problem. Then often you have to pull more than just the broken panels down, because it's not as simple as just taking one out and putting one in. If it's a panel from a few years ago and you can't get something that matches or close to matches electrically, it can drag the efficiency of the whole system down. So oftentimes, unfortunately, in those scenarios, we're having to take whole systems down and put new systems in, and that customer then again is left holding the bag. So there's other issues with panels, but probably water is the biggest one we've seen. And we're starting to see more with batteries. Batteries are a bit newer. Obviously, they haven't been as popular in Australia for that long yet, but we're installing a lot of batteries now, and I know that a lot of our competitors are installing a lot of batteries, and we're starting to see issues there with batteries that have been installed and they're not working anymore, and we're getting the call. So common issues with batteries is that the communication isn't working effectively between the hybrid inverter and the battery. We've then got to try and figure out if it's the inverter or the battery that's not working properly, where the issue is. Often that requires multiple visits to site, talking to different manufacturers. It can be a bit of a blame game as well, especially if the original installer's not involved. It could be an install issue, or is it an inverter issue, is it a battery issue? Who's responsible for that warranty and who's responsible for the cost? Unfortunately, the customer is responsible for the cost until someone steps up with the warranty. So if we have to come to site 2-3 times, spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes even longer to figure out what's actually going on, then you're stuck with the bill if you can't get hold of the original installer. And to be honest, even if you can, a lot of the time there's charges there from, shall we say, less reputable companies in the industry that aren't prepared to back their own warranties. So they're the main ones, and then obviously we have install problems. You can have the best installer, the best inverter, the best solar panel, the best battery. You can do your due diligence on the product. You can get unlucky with the installer, or you could go a bit too cheap and end up someone cutting costs because you've paid less than probably you should for the system. That's quite common. They do that to win your business, but then there's not much money in the job. So the installer turns up, does something to save time that can impact your warranties. We've seen a lot of issues with installs. It can be that your tin feet or your tile clamps are not installed correctly, so they've come loose on the roof. The spacing isn't correct. They've spaced them out too far to save money. There's no end caps on the end of the array, which means that basically the frame that's holding the panel to your roof is probably not that safe. That's a fairly common one. Things like using incorrect cables to run DC down to the inverter and your AC connection. Incorrect cables used mean that you're getting issues with voltage rise and other things associated with that. Panels put in the wrong place on the roof to save time and money, so it might be more effective for you to have your panels on a split array, split east and west, for example, or using multiple roof areas, but that was a bit too difficult and a bit too costly, so the installers put them where it suits them. And as a result, you're not getting the right efficiency from your system. I could go on and on and on. There's lots of other issues. You know, we've seen solar arrays where you get the thermal imaging out, camera on the panels, and you can see where people have just been walking all over them during the install. And there's micro fractures in the panels, which over time become increasingly detrimental to the overall efficiency of the system. There's lots of examples, but basically the idea is, in Australia, solar energy is cheaper than it is anywhere else in the world. That's partly because we get significant government support. We also have close to the best weather, depending on where you are in the country, anywhere in the world. So it means that you're getting really good performance and a really low cost. You don't need to shop around and get the cheapest. Unfortunately, that's what the market seems to be doing in Australia. A lot of the premium solar panel manufacturers have actually pulled out of the market because people just weren't purchasing them, because the market seems to be pushing towards budget. You don't need to do that. My advice would be get a good quality solar system installed with a good installer for a fair price. And then if you do it properly, you won't have to buy it twice. Whereas if you're shopping purely on price, unfortunately, that is where people seem to get burned. And if you go back to that average lifespan of 2.2 years for a solar installer or a solar retailer, In Australia, that's not a long time, considering they're handing out 10-year warranties on installs, 10-year warranties on inverters, 25-year warranties on solar panels, and they may or may not be around after a couple of years. So do your due diligence on the company first. Find somebody that's been around for a while, find someone that you can trust that's going to give you non-biased advice, and then pay a fair price, and don't try and do it too cheaply, because if you pay a fair price, you're going to get a really quick return on investment. Once you've returned your money, you're basically ahead then for the rest of the time you're in the home. If you go too cheap, this is what's going to happen. Before you know it, you've got $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 bill, maybe more if you have to replace the whole system, and then you've got to start again. So you don't need to do that. We're very lucky here in Australia, as I say, with pricing of solar systems and weather. So do it once, do it right, and you won't have to worry about any of this stuff.